Meeting called to order, 5:05 p.m.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 13th, 2026 special meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. As a courtesy to others, we ask that you please silence your cell phones and any other noise-making devices. A few reminders regarding public comments. If you would like to address the board, please submit a request to speak card to the assistant clerk before the agenda item is announced. If you wish to speak on an item not listed on the agenda or on the consent calendar, you may do so under public forum. During public forum, please refer to the Rent Board meeting agenda for the list of items or the agenda items list open for public comment sheet, which are posted above the table in front of the chambers. The first item on the agenda is pledge to the flag. Please join me in pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is the roll call. For the record, may I please get an audible roll call from Rent Board members and staff? Board Member Height,
Here.
Board Member Willis,
Here.
Chair Tipton,
Here.
Executive Director Fred Tran,
Here.
General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Here.
For the record, Board Member Espinoza and Vice Chair Cantor is absent. The next item on the agenda is Statement of Conflict of Interest. Are there any? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is Agenda Review. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Are there any changes to the agenda from board members?
Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is public forum. Tonight we have one speaker. The speaker shall be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board. When you are called to address the board, state your name and city of residence is optional. Please terminate your address to the board when your time expires. We ask that you keep your comments respectful and appropriate. The only speaker is Mr. Cordell Handler.
Thank you, Cynthia. So, good evening, Chair Tipton, board members. For the record, I am Cordell Handler, and I'm a Richmond resident. So, I would like to invite this board to the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference on July 9th. It will be hosted by the City of San Pablo at 6:30. So, more information by next month. So, but you have to RSVP ahead, and it's only $80 per person. That includes dinner, drink, and dessert. Wow. Number two is I was going through I was at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, and there was that item on there which I'm not allowed to say the item, but you get the idea of what that item is. So I can't go into much thought about that. So, but if you recall a few meetings back when you had an item regarding now I just lost my thought. Oh, I just remembered. When we had the Monterey Pines folks came back in March, one of the things that I thought of was like they need to get their input on positions, which you're going to be talking about shortly, and I'm like, they need to get their input because we want to hear from them about what they want to see, like habitability wise. Can't think of the correct terminology, but it's like repairs of the building, the repairs. So I'm hopefully that staff can provide an update at a future meeting. So that's two, and then number three is oh dear, I just remembered. Coming up, it'll come back to me. I'll skip that. So number four is going to be the if you recall when we had the previous rent board members came to be acknowledged, I thought it was a nice gesture to have them to receive their certificates. I thought that was lovely, and let the record reflect it was my idea to have it on the agenda. So I was like, that's perfect. So and then and I just remember the third thought, because the reason that this board had chosen Fred Tran to be the next executive director, because he has making sure that this program is going to stay afloat. So I'm glad that the board had came to that conclusion. So it's been long overdue. So I'm like, I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks. That's the only speaker we had tonight. The next item on the agenda is to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a motion?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Board Member Willis and a second by Board Member Height. I'll take a vote. Board Member Height,
Yes.
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
and Chair Tipton.
Yes.
Motion passes with Board Member Espinosa and Vice Chair Cantor absent. The next item on the agenda is item G1 under Budget and Study Session. Item G1 is to receive the proposed fiscal year 2026 through 27 rent program budget options. Number 1, receive fiscal year 2026-27 fee study. 2, adopt the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 rent program budget. And 3, direct staff to prepare a resolution establishing the fiscal year 2026-27 residential rental housing fee in the amount of $261 for fully covered rental units and $149 per partially covered rental unit, consistent with the approved fee study and adopted budget. There are no speakers on this item.
Thank you. We will now hear the staff report.
Good evening, Chair Tipton and members of the Rent Board. I'm Fred Tran, the Executive Director of the Rent Program, and the item before you is the fiscal year 2026-2027 rent program fee study and proposed budget. The statement of issue. At the special meeting of the Rent Board on April 30th, staff presented proposed budget options for the fiscal year 2026-2027 for approval with the corresponding residential rental housing fees. Staff was directed to return today for the proposed budgets for potential adoption. If the proposed budget is approved today, staff intends to bring a resolution to City Council in June for approval of the updated residential rental housing fee in the city's master fee schedule. Currently, we are utilizing a two-tier structure consisting of fully covered rental units and partially covered rental units, and staff will apply that methodology for the upcoming billing season. Fiscal impacts. If the proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 rent program budget is adopted tonight, we would authorize a revenue amount of approximately $3.6 million and expenditures of approximately $3.5 million, which would result in rental housing fees for fully covered units of $261 and $149 for partially covered rental units. Option 3 was approved last board meeting, and it did use the status quo approach for the non-personnel expenditures. No additional roles or staff were added to the position control in option 3. Staff will continue to request for the approval from the city for the prior year's board approved roles that are currently vacant within the program, and those will be discussed at the later slide. And the new memorandum of understanding that were executed by the 3 bargaining units were implemented with the terms of a 5% salary increase, merit step and longevity increases. And currently, the budget is using the two-tier method. A $30,000 amount had been included in the budget to potentially conduct a fee study to consider implementing a one-tier method in the future. And $50,000 had been added to the budget for a hearing examiner contract to assist with petitions. And the cost pool charges, the amount did increase from last year. With that increase, we still do receive it nets out to zero via the transfer in that we receive from the city from the cooperation agreement we have with the city. And the cost pool charges consist of general liability insurance, administrative charges, civic center rent, as well as workers' compensation insurance. And at this meeting, our goal is to have the budget adopted. We're actually down to the last month because in June, the city has 2 scheduled meetings, and if we can get the adoption tonight, then we'll present the resolution on the June 16th calendar. The position control, the board has approved 15 full-time staff. As mentioned, currently a third of the staff is vacant, and with option 3, we're going to request for the hiring of these 3 particular roles. 1, an office assistant. 2, a administrative trainee. And the third is a rent program service analyst. And presented before you here is the history of the fees from the inception of the program to the current proposed fee. The rent program is a special revenue fund, and the residential rental fees have been able to recover the cost to administer the program. The fees will decrease from prior years, and it'll decrease for both the fully covered as well as the partially covered units. The revenues and expenditures are expected to decrease approximately $100,000 for both the revenues as well as the expenditures. So, the expenses will decrease by about 3% and revenues approximately 3.5%. With the decrease in revenues and expenses, the fully covered unit cost per unit will decrease by $6. That's approximately 2%. And the partially covered units will be at $149, which is a $2 decrease at approximately 1%. The budget, the funds expended, as well as the collections are presented here from inception to as current as possible. The latest report we were able to run in the MENA system is as of April 30th, 2026. And if you look at the chart here, the rent program is able to collect fees on an annual basis to fund the program. Currently, this year, we're just over $3 million, and that makes up approximately 83% of the budgeted amount. Staff will continue to reconcile the data within the IMS land management system that's currently been implemented by the city. As well, staff will continue to collect on the outstanding fees from the past. A recommendation for the reserve accounts as to how we should fund the reserve at the end of the fiscal year will be brought in the June meeting. Once we get the May report, then we'll have a better basis with our cash balance, and that's when the recommendation will be made. Okay, next steps. The next steps, the board will need to first adopt the proposed budget presented in front of you today. Then staff will apply the updated residential rental housing fee to the master fee schedule to bring a resolution to the city council for approval. Ideally, the submitted item will be on the June 16th city council agenda. In the past, the item had been deferred, so if that were to happen, we would go to the June 23rd meeting, and that's the same meeting the city is planning to adopt their budget, so it may be a long, extended meeting, but we're hoping to get our fees approved prior to that. And finally, once the resolution is approved, staff will begin the billing and invoice process. And recommended action. The recommended action is to receive a fiscal year 2026-2027 fee study, adopt the proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 rent program budget, and direct staff to prepare a resolution establishing the fiscal year 2026-2027 residential rental housing fee in the amount of $261 for fully covered rental units and $149 for partially covered rental units, consistent with the fee study and adopted budget. That concludes my presentation, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from members of the board? I have just a quick one that's mostly curiosity. Going back to the slide that had the collection rate data on it, I have two questions. One, I'm wondering if anyone happens to have on hand, or if we could find comparison data, collection rate data from sort of comparative programs.
We don't from comparative programs. We have the fees from other programs. I worked at the city of San Jose prior to here, and the collection rate was actually well over 90%, and that was due to the housing invoice being sent out in conjunction with code enforcement's invoice, and their data was very clean, and so typically they would receive most of the revenues within 1 to 2 months, and then the program would work with code enforcement after the 60 days to literally call on all the outstanding, and I believe it was over 90%, 95% collections rate.
And just anecdotally, I know people who worked for Berkeley and who currently work for Berkeley, and their collection rate's well above 90% as well. It's like around 95%. They also had like a 100% late fee penalty that was heavily enforced.
Thank you both. That's really helpful because it's hard to understand the numbers in a vacuum. So just knowing that level of enforcement is realistic is useful. So I guess relatedly, looking at 2019 and 2020, we had 93% and 107%, which I assume was collecting the missing 7% from the year before. Do you have any thoughts on how we were able to achieve such a good collection rate those years, and that it drops pretty precipitously after that?
So I think you're right to point out in 2020 it's 107%, and so there's some overage there. And just so you all recall, this is a cost recovery program. It's impossible for you to collect more than 100% of your expenditure in a given fiscal year. I think it's fair to assume that the extra 7% is coming from the 1920, but we don't have data on that. So there's also the possibility that, for instance, in 2020, 2021, you only collected 70%, and then the overages were coming from the prior years. So we don't know how much is what, but we do know that there is an overage that doesn't represent that particular year. And then the second part of your question was?
Just that those 2 years, 2019, 20, and then 2020, 21, are both outliers. And I'm just wondering, what did we do right for those years?
That's right. Now I remember. It was COVID. And because of COVID, there was a lot of restrictions on how landlords could evict their tenants. There was a moratorium. So there was a greater emphasis on being in compliance with the city overall, because the city was also pulling a lot of levers at the city council side. And it brought a lot of tenants to the program, just generally. It almost served as an educational tool, because both tenants and landlords were looking at how to navigate the housing industry during COVID. And we were the program that they went to. So we got a lot of people calling us. And so we were able to enroll a lot of people, able to collect a lot of bills. And after COVID kind of waned a little bit, then people kind of went back to what they've been doing, which is, to be fair, a vast majority of landlords pay the fee and are very compliant. It is just a segment that are harder to find.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is actually a question and a comment, but next time and ahead of time, I don't know if this needs to be added in motion, but I'm wondering if we could have like a side-by-side comparisons of other rent programs, fee schedules for fully covered, partially covered, and government subsidized, just to kind of show like where everybody else is at in the state and kind of like where we're falling in that bar graph, just to kind of compare and contrast. Because I know there are questions sometimes about how these fees get set, and I didn't see like that in today's presentation, but that was something that I would have liked to see. It's just like, where do we stand compared to other jurisdictions, and making that clear to the city and city council as well.
And that does not have to be put in a motion, so we'll make sure to do it next time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the 17% that aren't paying, is there any way can we do something? Because it isn't fair to the people that are paying, letting the other people get away with it. Yeah.
Yes, we can. So if you recall, the board passed a few months ago, I think in October, you passed the lien, or at least you directed us to work with the city attorney to prepare the lien ordinance to go before city council. And then sometime in February or January of this year, we spoke about the real estate disclosure forms, and you approved us working with city attorney and the city on that. So those are two things that we are currently working through, as well as the buyout ordinance, which is a separate thing, but that's part of the whole puzzle. But I think that personally, I think that the lien ordinance would have a great impact as long as your data is accurate, right? Because if you're going to lien a property, you have to be sure that that property is actually a rental property. But as long as we know it's a rental property, the lien process would be relatively quick, and it's it's essentially guaranteed because it shows up on your property taxes. And in order to satisfy your property taxes, you cannot decide you're going to partially pay a property tax. You pay everything, right? They don't accept partial payments. And so our lien amount would be shown on your property tax. When you pay that property tax, the county will separate once they receive the full payment, they will take our lien portion and they will send that to us. We, per our agreement with the city, we give the city, I think, 5% of that, or 10, I can't remember. I think it's 5%, and we take the 95. So we're definitely working on that to get that off the ground for the next fiscal year.
And this won't take a lot of staff time this will be fairly streamlined.
The lien, it depends. Ordinarily, it's a pretty streamlined process, but you do, as a landlord, you have a right to a hearing, and you have a right to an appeal. But the idea is that if you're a landlord your basis of a hearing is very limited, right? You're typically arguing that you made a mistake, I didn't rent. And that's why it's important for us to know and have our information on the forefront and have clean data. So we are able to remove that basis of an argument because factually we know you rented your place in this fiscal year. And other than that, your only other argument maybe is the bill is wrong. But generally, when a landlord contacts the program and we start speaking about invoices, they pay. It's just getting in contact with them is the problem. So usually the lien will be, in my opinion, a stronger impetus for landlords to contact us. And for those who don't, we'll send them to the lien. But generally, I think not a lot of landlords will be liened. I think they will contact us, bring themselves into compliance, and move forward.
I think you just started to answer one of my questions, which is, Fred, you had mentioned the cleanliness of data in San Jose as an example. So my question was kind of, how clean is our data? So if we're missing, say, 17% collections, do we know who we're missing it from, how much we're missing, how to contact them? And it sounds like it's messy, but that the lien process should be a workaround for a significant amount of that? Or what do you think?
It'll require both. Cleaning up the data as well as the lien ordinance will definitely assist.
Yeah, we want to be careful too because I know Melvin or Chair Member Willis would remember this. Back in 18, 19, there was, I think it was 18, the program did a mass mailing. It was pretty much, we first started, and we billed a lot of individuals who were not landlords. And it was clear that they were not landlords. They were commercial buildings, and our data was just really bad. And that led to a lot of blowback for the program politically. And the mayor at that time really attached himself to that particular mistake that we had made. And it just took so many hours of just answering politically driven questions rather than actually substantively driven questions. And I think it really painted the program in the beginning in a very bad light. And we got a lot of scrutiny, rightfully or wrongfully. And so if we're going to do a lien, so if we are billing landlords and 17% are not responding and we're deciding we're going to lien these people, a lien is a lot more serious than a mistaken invoice, right? So we have to definitely be careful with cleaning up the data. But like I said, at the other end of the spectrum, the lien will get those people to contact you. And that's one way to clean up your data. You know, they're going to say, I'm not an owner or whatever the case might be. One last thing, because I'm not sure if Fred mentioned this, but it's also tenants as well, right? You get the information from landlords that they're renting, but tenants can also tell you that this unit's rented that we may not know about or that we do know about and the landlord just hasn't paid. And so I think Fred has spoken to me about educational outreach, better targeted educational outreach and community outreach. I think Board Member Willis mentioned meeting people where they are, and I think Board Member Tomas has also mentioned that as well, or Espinoza. And I think Fred has a pretty unique plan where now we have districts in Richmond. And so I think his plan is more targeted outreach rather than mass mailing to every district, because not every district needs to know about the rent program because they already do. And not every district needs the same level of service from the rent, or same level of education from the rent program. And so targeting districts, for instance, I'm just making it up, but let's just say District 1 is primarily Spanish speaking. Well, then making sure that a lot of your ways you target that community is going to be more fluid for the community members there. Or looking at your data where the greatest amount of non-payment of rents are coming from, or something like this, some type of eviction, then making sure you craft your mailing to that. And other things we're trying to think about, billboards, which we may not have enough money for, but education so that tenants can reach out and say, oh, yeah, I am a rental. And we can either confirm, yes, we have you in your record in the system and the landlords haven't paid. And so we know now it's a rental, we can lien this place. Or we don't know, and now we have a new unit and we can start the process. So A lot of different avenues.
Yeah, and one thing that I know used to happen in the beginning of the program's inception, which could be what just happens at a neighborhood scale or district scale. I mean, we could talk about details what that looks like on each district because every district has multiple personalities to it. So let's be clear about like folks will gather in certain areas of a neighborhood regardless of what district it is. So making sure that we're being cognizant of that as those things are planning out. But that's something that used to happen in the beginning, as there used to be a meeting downstairs in the basement area where they would bring tenant and landlords to come up, and it would be a monthly meeting just to kind of do like rent program 101, some of the changes that are coming and everything. I think what ended up stopping that was COVID, and it just never resumed from there. But doing those similar things like that on top of the postcards about what the rent program is, how to contact, and even how to get information is would be good to do, just to add to the conversation that's being had over here.
Yeah, and when I said targeted outreach, definitely mailers, but also actually going to the districts ourselves and not just shooting paper at people. I think we did stop the some of that engagement because of COVID, and we still do the engagement because we do it over video now, Zoom, and we also found that the individuals, we had to actually separate tenant and landlords. In the beginning, we were doing them at the same time in one group, and it was not fruitful. It was very contentious. So we started doing separate, and we just found that the individuals who were attending those meetings were the individuals who already knew about the rent program. And we needed a more effective way of reaching people who either didn't know or had a grave misunderstanding of the program. So we plan to leverage, technology, but also hopefully be on the ground in those districts.
All questions from the board? No further questions. Madam Clerk, please call public speakers, if any.
No speakers on this item.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to direct staff to prepare a resolution to establish the fiscal year 2026-2027 rent program budget and bring the new proposed fee schedule to the city council for adoption. By fee schedule, I mean the $261 per fully covered controlled unit, rental unit, and $149 per partially covered rental units, consistent with the fee study and adopted budget.
Could I make a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
To also receive the fiscal year 2026-27 fee study and adopt the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 rent program budget?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I second.
Madam Clerk, let's take a vote.
Okay. Board Member Height,
Yes.
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
and Chair Tipton.
Yes.
Motion passes with Board Member Espinoza and Vice Chair Cantor absent. Okay, next item on the agenda is reports of officers.
Reports of officer, we are still continuing the study session on the regulations that the board directed us to do. And next month we'll have a fairly full calendar again just to catch up on everything.
Okay, and I do have an announcement just to remind board members and staff and the public that there will not be a board meeting next Wednesday on the 20th. The regular rent board meeting is canceled for the 20th since we met this evening. And I will post that on the website and sit on a listserv tomorrow.
And just one announcement from me, for scheduling, we're going to have an appeal for the next meeting. And I am just wondering from all of you, if you prefer that appeal to be on the regularly scheduled meeting, which is going to be a long calendar, or would you like me to schedule a special meeting later in the month of June after the regular meeting? Or I can put the appeal in July. It's up to the board on the regular meeting in July.
If we already have a long calendar for June, I would personally lean toward either a special meeting or July.
Sounds good.
No preference.
Yeah, special meeting or July.
No preference?
Yeah, no preference. I'm down. It's just if we need to do a special meeting, then we could do a special meeting, like either or.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
And one more?
Yeah, I will say that, in the past week, and I'm sure the other folks in the rent program have received similar calls, but I did get some complaint calls related to things that are still happening at Monterey Pines. Some things I directed to the Richmond Building Inspections Department, but they're dealing with things like water shut off, and I don't know if it seemed like there was any warning. And they also recently had a meeting that went over the extensive list of how many inspections were failed, which, if I can recall, it was like over 100. So these are things that just slowly been being informed to me as the situation at Monterey Pines continues. So I did at least want to share that for the record real quick.
All right. I guess we are adjourned. That's the last item.
Meeting adjourned, 5:42 PM.